Bams, we are back. We are the American Adversaries Drive Time Prime Time Show coming to you live on AM 660 The Answer and straight into your smart devices. If you were smart enough to load up those apps, I appreciate it so very much that you're listening. All right, I am Christopher Hart. I'll take us right up to 7 o'clock. And don't forget, folks, join us for our live remote broadcast at Cafe Positano on the 22nd of this month. That's a week from this coming Monday, so the time is rapidly approaching. We're going to have a lot of fun there, and please do come on out and join us. And if you would like to make a reservation for that night or any night or day, for that matter, at Cafe Positano, call them over there at 407-774-8080. That's Cafe Positano, 4 miles west of I-4 on State Road 436, 407-774-8080. And by the way, Jerry of Jerry's Mercedes-Benz Service, that's Jerry Shepard, is going to be there that night, so you have an opportunity to welcome him to the American Adversaries Army Task Force, and thank him, if you would, for being a sponsor of the American Adversaries Show, because I couldn't do it without great sponsors like him and without members to our American Adversaries Army. The Army is growing, and the more it grows, the more important it is to me, because it really helps us make the bills around here. So if you'd like to join the Army, just go to AmericanAdversariesRadio.com and go to the recruiting office and sign up right there. You can either do it online or you can do it snail mail version. So please consider joining the American Adversaries Army and help us accomplish the task of forcing the truth and the light upon the world. So Marco Rubio is the marked man. That's the bad news. The good news is that means that the Democrats are worried about him. And I guess the takeaway is that keep doing whatever it is you're doing there, Marco, because you're rattling their cage. And if they think that making a big deal out of him getting a book advance and buying a boat with the money and taking out the loans to go through college, what a nasty idea that is, and taking out a loan to buy a house and even a second house. The guy's living the American dream, and he's starting at the bottom and is clawing his way up. I mean, in an odd sort of way, I think they're actually making his case, because part of his appeal is that he's one of us. He's not some alien, from wherever it is these aliens come from that plop themselves down in the middle of our political process. Aliens like Hillary Clinton, who wouldn't know which end of the boat is the front, or the bow or the stern. I mean, somebody who's so out of touch as her going around trying to sell her off as the champion of the common person, it just goes to show what a joke sometimes politics can be, which of course is why we say it's like professional wrestling. So anyway, the good news for the rest of the candidates is, while the media is focusing on Marco, they can continue hopefully to get their message out. Of course, the bad news for them is, in the old saying, any publicity is good publicity. So at least it's getting Marco's name out there in the news more and more. And like I say, unless they can come up with something serious, the most serious thing they've come up with is trying to tie him into this scandal, the Republican Party scandal. It was a couple of years ago when Charlie Crist's man, who was heading the Republican Party here in Florida, was basically a scoundrel, ended up going to prison for it, wrote a book about it. I can't recall his name right off the top of my head, but that shows how important the fella is to me. But the bottom line is, Marco Rubio was in the state legislature at the time. He did have a Republican Party credit card. It was used to purchase a trip and some cobblestones for a house, which he has explained the trip was a mistake. The cobblestones, he pulled out the wrong credit card. He made good on both of those purchases. Don't think for a minute, though, that the liberals are going to accept his explanations. They will continue to drill that home. They will continue to drill into him and his wife for having, 14 speeding violations or something like that. But as I said, Marco being the marked man at this point in the game is actually a very good sign for him. it means that they are scared of him. They are taking him quite seriously when you think that they would be focusing their guns on Jeb Bush. Because when you get right down to it, and John Stemberger's right, we got a lot of good talent on the Republican side. But when you get right down to it, it all kind of does come down to dollars. And whoever has enough dollars to get them further into the campaign than the other guys, they'll be the ones who have the best chance of winning. Having said that, Bush is going to have the dollars. He'll have the dollars to take this as far as he can take it. The question is, which of the other candidates will be able to produce the dollars to do that? I think Rubio has a chance to do that. Ted Cruz has a chance to do that. Maybe Huckabee, maybe Santorum, the rest of them, maybe Scott Walker, but the rest of them, it's going to be really difficult to come up with the dollars that they need. Perhaps with the exception of Carly Fiorina. She and her husband have a net worth of about $50 million. Now, that's not enough by itself. Every dollar of it wouldn't be enough by itself to win the campaign. But say $5 or $10 million out of their own pocket would be enough to keep her in the campaign for quite a while, and maybe she should get some traction along the way. But the bottom line is going to be who can raise enough money to keep them in the game. And so we shall see. But at least early on, we know Jeb will. Marco could very well come up with that money. And I think that the more that the media focuses on him in an odd sort of way, the better it's going to be for him. As long as he is the marked man, he will get the attention, and he will get the sympathies, if you will, and of many Republicans, and perhaps including some big-pocketed donors. So we'll see. Okay. George W. Bush in June of 2007 gave a speech basically warning not to allow the Iraqis not to sign a security of forces agreement with the United States, which would, of course, made it possible for us to keep troops there. He said it was very vital that we keep troops in Iraq in order to preserve the precious victory, and indeed it was a victory that we had achieved by the end of his term. And he turned over a pacified and, to a great extent, stable Iraq to the new president, Barack Hussein Obama. And in his 2007 speech, he predicted that if the troops were withdrawn completely from Iraq, it would not be long before the country would fall into chaos. Iran would step in and basically take over. You would have radical terrorists, perhaps even another terrorist state, and then eventually we would have to go back. Well, guess what? We are going back. It's been a gradual thing. We never actually fully left. We maintain 4 bases now in Iraq. We have minimal personnel on each of these bases, numbering in the hundreds, maybe 500, 600 per base, for a total of somewhere between 2,000 and 3,000 troops on the ground, boots on the ground in Iraq right now in quote-unquote an advisory and training capacity. Much of this, by the way, was in yesterday's Orlando Sentinel. Today it was announced that the White House is considering reopening another base in Iraq, which would make 5 bases in Iraq, and in reinserting another couple, 300, 400, 500 troops back into the theater. Of course, the problem with this is it's not enough to deal with the problem. The problem is it's not enough to deal with the problem. And so what Barack Obama is simply doing is allowing the situation over there to fester and get worse and make it look like he is doing something. This is so minuscule of a reinsertion of troops as to be ineffectual. As good as our military is, as professional as they are, as well trained as they are, as well equipped as they are, when they don't have the numbers, they don't have the numbers. And the problem is that this is going to allow the situation to deteriorate even more over there, which of course is going to require more troops, and you see the cycle that we're now into. This is so reminiscent of what how Thomas Jefferson was similarly vexed by the group we know as the Barbary Pirates, which were radical Muslims of the day who were kidnapping, enslaving, demanding ransom from whole nations. As a matter of fact, the United States paid them ransom. Paid them ransom for hostages, paid them to free slaves, and Jefferson didn't really know what to do. As a matter of fact, I believe as his Secretary of the Treasury said, just pay them. Just give them the money, right? We can afford it. Well, of course, the problem is you can never afford it, because when you start paying them, they always want more. Because if you can pay them this, well, you can pay them this plus, right? Whatever this happens to be. And so Jefferson didn't want to do that, but he didn't really want to do what it took to take care of business. So he would send over a ship. And, of course, that ship would be ultimately captured and the crew enslaved. And toward the end of his term, he was so perplexed, and he thought, well, I'll send over one more ship. And the ship happened to be called the Philadelphia. And he thought, well, maybe that's an omen. I'll send over the Philadelphia. That's where our first capital was. That's where I wrote the Constitution. We wrote the Declaration of Independence there. So the Philadelphia, we'll have God on our side if I send the Philadelphia. Of course, the Philadelphia got over there. It ran aground on a reef, and the crew was captured and enslaved. And these guys were treated horribly. They were not treated nice. They were treated quite horribly. And so he handed off the problem to the next president, which is what this president is going to do. He's going to hand off the problem to the next president. I only hope that we get a president like Madison. When Madison was elected, he decided that what he was going to do was a different approach. And he had a notion right away what he was going to do. He didn't need any time to develop a strategy. He knew what had to be done. So it was basically a two-step process. Step number one, he built up a huge naval armada, one of the largest navies of the day, and certainly the largest navy we'd ever had. Of course, we never had much of a navy, but he knew that the powers of the day, that the countries that had the strongest navies were the biggest players in the world, and people didn't want to mess with them so much. So he built up a navy. He sailed it over, parked it off the shore of Tripoli. He sent a representative with a personal letter from him to the Pasha, who was the leader of the Muslims at that time, and he gave him a choice. He said, look, you can either free our hostages, let us alone, we will not pay you any tribute, we will go our way, you can go your way, or I'm going to blow the hell out of you. Which would you rather have? Well, the Pasha thought about it and said, I'd rather have my life. I think I'll wait on them there 72 virgins, and I'll take the deal where we'll just let your hostages go, and we'll leave you alone. He took the hostages. He sailed home without firing a shot. Now, I'm not saying we can get away with doing the same thing in Iraq, but I am saying it's going to have to be a two-step process, and whichever the president that follows this one is, whoever that may be, I hope that they know this. The first thing they're going to have to do is to rebuild a mighty military. The mightiest the world has ever known, even mightier than we have ever had. Because our enemies are mightier than they have ever been. And it's going to take a mighty military to either put the fear of God in them or to knock them down and take them out. All right. Don't take us out. We'll be right back with more.